Good morning, everyone. Will DuPree here in the KXAN live studio, and Happy New Year to all of you out there. We are officially in 2020, which means the presidential election is just a few months away, and we have some political news to share this morning. Texas's very own Julián Castro has now dropped out of the presidential primary process, ending his campaign today. He announced it earlier this morning in a video posted on his Twitter account, and so we wanted to talk a little bit about that this morning. So to do that, we have our KXAN political reporter, Phil Prazan, joining us here in the studio. Phil, good morning.
Hey, thanks, Will.
Yeah, and tell us what your reaction was when you saw this came out, because it was blown out all over Twitter earlier this morning. What'd you think?
Well, he announced it with a pretty high production value video, right? And people were watching it here in the newsroom, and it was kind of really a good wrap up of his campaign. So they made it a thing. It wasn't just a quiet walk into the background. And in bigger the bigger picture here is Julián Castro is probably one of the only candidates who has left this race with a better reputation than he went in. A lot of people had fall from grace, including our other Texan, Beto O'Rourke, who was in the race. And this will just add to the speculation that he's going to be a very attractive vice presidential candidate for whoever ends up getting the nomination. Him and Elizabeth Warren have really connected over this campaign, and they've had great things to say about each other. There's a lot of speculation that if Warren is the nominee, then she would pick Julián Castro, because that would really balance that ticket with geography, and then also kind of their stories. And you have a white woman from New England and a young Hispanic male from Texas. It would be a pretty balanced ticket, but I'm sure all the other candidates are looking at Castro as well.
Yeah, reactions are pouring in. Important to note there, you mentioned Elizabeth Warren. She tweeted within seconds of him posting that video some very kind words to him about his campaign and his vision. I want to show you all that tweet that he posted. We had that on the screen just a minute ago. He says, "It's with profound gratitude to all of our supporters that I suspend my campaign for president today." And in the video that you're seeing, we don't have the audio from that, but you can watch it on Twitter if you want to. He says, "I've determined that it simply isn't our time." And it seems, Phil, that throughout the process, polling didn't back him up, and neither did fundraising.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he just didn't have the support with the voters or the donors to survive in this very crowded Democratic primary field. Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and now with Mike Bloomberg coming in, really playing in the Super Tuesday states, there just wasn't that much room for him. He wasn't as high a profile candidate as others. And then, he was making an argument on the way out of this campaign, now that we know, about how the process is pretty stacked against candidates and people of color. And I think that's an argument that is slowly going to get more popular.
Yeah, he certainly made a case for potentially moving Iowa out of first place in terms of the caucuses and primaries. And as you see at the bottom of the screen there, Iowa caucus happening in 32 days now.
Yeah, and for decades it has been the most important kind of starting line in the presidential race. But there's a pretty serious conversation happening in the background of the Democratic Party among party people, about is that the best case going forward? Because the Iowa, New Hampshire, predominantly white, and there's a case to be made that the structure of which states vote when are kind of weeding out the candidates of color. President Barack Obama, of course, is the big argument, saying that a candidate of color can win Iowa and do well in the early states. But I mean, look at who's at the top of the charts now and the polls now in Iowa and in this whole race. I mean, it is Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg. I mean, Andrew Yang is the only candidate of color on this last debate stage. He might not even make the next debate.
Right.
And so you're going to have a lot of white, predominantly older white people. And there's an argument to be made that the state of Iowa isn't exactly a purple state anymore. I mean, President Trump won it by 10 points,
Yeah.
I think.
And I believe
last
all
time.
their state constitutional offices are Republicans as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, well, in Iowa and Ohio, President Trump won those states by 10 points, and he won Texas by 9. You know, so if I think it's just a more evidence of a larger political realignment. That's, you know, more and more people are moving to the Southwest, and those states are becoming more competitive, Democrat and Republican, versus, you know, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. Just people are leaving those states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Population changes for sure. If you're just joining us, we are talking about Julián Castro, the former Housing and Urban Development Secretary and former mayor of San Antonio, not too far from Austin here, dropping out the presidential race, ending his campaign for the Democratic Party's nomination. We have KXAN's political reporter Phil Prazan joining us here to talk about that. A lot of you are commenting on Facebook at the moment. Do you think his impact will be felt much further after this? I mean, obviously he's going to be in some good graces with people that are going to be sending out their support, their kind words to him. The other presidential candidates are falling in line behind that. What do you think his impact will be?
He really did make a big impact. I mean, he wasn't there with the voters or the donors or the polling, but he has somewhat embraced, you know, he has made other candidates react to him, right? Especially, specifically, he was the most prominent supporter of repealing Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is kind of which is what the law that makes crossing the border with, you know, illegally against the law. That's the criminal charges of that. And so he really embraced that, and everybody else in the race followed him. So that's a specific policy of you know, of decriminalizing border crosses, right? Now Republicans will disagree with that, and that's going to be a kind of a difficult sell, I think, on the general population when it comes to a November election. But in a Democratic primary, they ate it up, and he throughout his campaign has really kind of pushed marginalized communities into the conversation. You know, like I think his first campaign trip was to Puerto Rico.
Right.
Which, you know,
And he touted that very often on the debate stage, out on the field there too.
when everybody else was going to Iowa, he was going to, you know, a place that's not even a state.
And if you do watch his video today that was posted on Twitter, he highlights all of those trips he made, not just to the U.S.-Mexico southern border, to Puerto Rico and other places like that.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, you know, how much he thought that was a winning strategy, or if he just wanted to do this as kind of like the first person over the wall to begin these conversations on a large level, right?
Yeah.
Like going to Puerto Rico, you know, repealing Section 1325, you know, doing his work. He went to like underground tunnels, I think, in Vegas to like see homeless people who were living there.
That is also in his video that he posted this morning.
Yeah, he did just like a lot of really, you know, some would say random, but others people say, you know, showing a spotlight on communities that usually don't get the spotlight.
Sure.
And so if, you know, he can claim that as a win, and I think that's why he's being looked at as a very popular vice presidential pick.
Now, in addition to Julián Castro dropping out of the race today, fundraising numbers are starting to come in from the final quarter in 2019. And I want to show you all, we kind of compiled the people who have released their numbers yet. There are many that have not done so just yet. So if you want to take a look at this screen real quick, here we go. Senator, on the Democrats that we have numbers for, they're listed first. And of course, we have President Trump, who released his numbers too for fundraising. But take a look there. I mean, Senator Bernie Sanders brought in $34.5 million in that final quarter of 2019, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg, $24.7 million. And then Andrew Yang coming in with $16.5 million. And I had read that was his best fundraising quarter of his campaign so far. Interesting.
Andrew Yang?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
interesting to see him up there.
That looks about right. I mean, so first on the Democratic side, before we get to President Trump, I mean, Bernie Sanders, continues to show just an incredibly stable support base. I mean, he has been at about 20% in the polls from the get-go. He has he has a bunch of folks signed up for weekly contributions. Joe Texan out there signs up $100, gives $100 to Bernie Sanders, and they click the "I want to give this every week." I think he can raise $1 million a week just by that without doing anything else.
An impressive haul for sure.
Yeah, and then he, I was reading in the New York Times that there's 1.8 million donations
During that quarter.
Yeah, so like people are giving small amounts, but there's just so many of them. Like everybody who's a Bernie Sanders fan is giving money to him. And then Pete Buttigieg also with a good fundraising haul. Now he does do the big, more traditional wine and dine fundraising, which kind of led to a heated conversation in the last Democratic debate with Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will not go away. But he has a good argument. He says, hey, from his perspective, he says they're trying to beat Donald Trump, and they have to just get as much money as possible.
Yeah, and if you take a look there, I mean, President Trump brought in $46 million during that last quarter. He's had big amounts throughout the year.
Totally. I mean, there's two big reasons for that. One is incumbents. There's a rule in politics that incumbents mostly win, right? Because people give money for either access or to support, the causes. And if your guy is on top, which President Trump is right now, it's easy to give money to be nice to the person in charge, right? And also, there's a lot of people who support his policies and want to continue to see his economic policies, his immigration policies continue. And so he's able to raise a lot of money. So there's one, just being the president makes you very popular with a lot of people.
Right.
Then two, it's kind of integrated with the Republican National Committee. So because the Republicans already have their guy for the most part. He's been able to galvanize support behind him when in the Democratic primary field they are fighting over who's going to be the guy or girl, right? So it's a lot of money. I mean, President Trump is going to have a ridiculous amount of money to move towards whoever the Democratic opponent is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, 2020 is going to be a fight.
And we are there now. In addition, I wanted to highlight some reporting that you had done last week, talking about kind of the state of play here in Texas. Mm-hmm. Many candidates have opened offices. They're opening even more now here in 2020. Can you tell us and recount for everybody out there who maybe didn't see your story or the reporting? It's on our website, by the way, everybody, KXAN.com. Tell us about what you found out.
So, former mayor of New York, Mike Bloomberg, opened 17 offices, announced he's opening 17 offices in Texas. So one Houston headquarters and then 16 field offices, which would include one here in Austin. And that will be by far the most direct investment in the state of Texas by a campaign. The one who has been leading the pack on this has been Elizabeth Warren. I think she has 5 field offices right now and like more than 20 staffers on the ground working. So there are going to be a lot of people in Texas asking for your vote. Mike Bloomberg's strategy has been kind of to skip those early states of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada and really play in the Californias, the Texases, the Super Tuesday states and prioritize on that. I'm sure you have seen TV commercials and digital ads from Mike Bloomberg this whole time.
They are playing constantly. And I was home in Arkansas during the holidays, all over TV there too.
Yep. His strategy is to already look at this as a general election. He already thinks he's going to win the Democratic primary, so a lot of his ads are general election ads targeting President Trump. So there's that. I mean, and he is one of the big X factor. I mean, it's Mike Bloomberg and his gazillion dollars, right? I mean, it's just this will be a very good test case about what you can do with just buckets of money, right? Like he's not. Before this, he was not a favorite among Democratic primary voters, and so we will be able to see if he can change people's minds just by bombarding them with ads and campaign workers. And he's not going to run out of money. There's that. He's an X factor, and then Andrew Yang is the X factor. It's just interesting to see how he has slowly and surely been building support. He's not your traditional Democratic primary candidate. I mean, even his slogans are like not left, not right, but forward, which is even a general election kind of thinking already.
Right.
And he's just, he's like a Julián Castro, but has survived longer, right? He's just bringing these kind of fringe issues into the non-fringe world, right?
That's a good way to put that. Exactly. Yeah.
Like the universal basic income, like is now people are talking about it because of Andrew Yang. And that can't go, go unnoticed.
Now, again, it is only the second day of January, second day of 2020, but we're seeing Julián Castro drop out. Do you feel like more chips will fall, more candidates will fall out of the race here shortly? I mean, do you think some people will hold on until Iowa? Because, again, the caucus is only 32 days away.
Yeah, I think most people will hold on until Iowa. I mean, I think that the top tier is pretty solid with Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. They don't seem to be going anywhere. It's hard, but Amy Klobuchar, Andrew Yang, like if they don't perform well in Iowa, and even Pete Buttigieg to that matter, if they don't perform well in Iowa, I don't know what their path looks like. And then you have Mike Bloomberg as an X factor. And just you never know what happens. I mean, it looks like it's going to go all the way to the convention because people are not going to run out of money. People are, and these are all pretty high tier candidates. So it's going to be a long, long haul. I would not be surprised if the Democrats don't pick a nominee until the convention in the summer. But it's going to be interesting to watch.
Of course, we will be following along with it all this time because there are still months to go until that November election later this year. Again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about Julián Castro dropping out of the presidential primary process today, ending his campaign for the Democratic nomination. We've talked about fundraising numbers coming in. Only about 4 candidates so far, including President Trump in that number, have released their fundraising totals. So we'll keep an eye on that too, because that'll be interesting to see if somebody might have spiked a little after this last debate or fallen off too. I mean, there's been speculation about different candidates at this point.
Well, historically, I mean, people are out with their numbers early if they're happy with their numbers.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it looks good to be out there with that, yeah.
So, the candidates who have not announced, they might not do as well as they hoped. Now, that's just historically speaking. I mean, we don't know until all the reports are due in a couple weeks or 2 weeks or so in mid-January. But
again, those are good hauls. They want to say, like, look what we've done. There's some momentum there.
Totally. And I never underestimate just how much money there is in politics in America right now. I mean, the numbers are just getting bigger, and they're going to continue to get bigger. I mean, President Trump has a lot of campaign donations.
A big war chest for sure.
Yeah. So it's going to be, and it's all going to be spent. It has to be spent this year.
Here we go.
So get ready. Get ready.
It is 2020, guys. Election year is upon us once again. It's here.
And Texas will play an outsized role. And I think that's also important. Like, Texans will notice more political activity, more campaign ads, just because it's going to be so important in the Democratic primary. And then also, it could be, it is at least looked at as a swing state in certain areas.
Sure. I mean, 2018 definitely showed that Democrats have a little more play here in Texas.
It's it's still a red state, but it is a little less red, and it is competitive. And so I think the more the Democrats make it competitive in Texas, the more money Republicans across the country have to put into Texas, and that means less money gets to go into Wisconsin and Michigan and Iowa, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is part of a grand strategy, if you will.
When the races are a little more competitive, they're more fun to cover, too. We just got to be honest about that.
And, a lot of competition makes a lot of things better. You know?
Sure.
It keeps, if a politician thinks he or she might lose, they will think harder about their actions, right? I mean, political competition will make the state a better state, just because you have people looking over their shoulders and worrying, right? Which is, you never want a politician to not be scared of their voters, right? Because then they start doing things for their own interests, and that's not really good for a lot of people.
Important point to make there. Again, you all, we are going to wrap up our live stream here in just a few moments. But Phil, I wanted to tell you, let everyone know who's been watching that you're going to be working on a story today about Julián Castro suspending his campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little bit indication of where you're going with this story today?
What was the reason he didn't get the support?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's at the end of the day, he just didn't have the voters and didn't have the donors.
Yeah.
And that's pretty simple. So we're going to dive into a little bit about why that happened.
All right. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year to you and to all of you at home as well. Again, you can see Phil's story later this evening on KXAN News about Julián Castro dropping out of the presidential primary process and ending his campaign today. We thank you all for watching, and we'll see you back here on KXAN Live a little later today as well. Thanks, guys. Have a